The night I got humiliated in front of an entire restaurant was supposed to be the worst night of my life. Instead, it became the night that changed everything. One customer called me fat. Another demanded I be fired. And then a wealthy woman collapsed only a few feet away. Everyone froze. Everyone except me. I ran to help her. What I didn't know was that the woman I saved was the mother of the most feared mafia boss in Italy. And 3 days later, his family's secret will would place my name beside his. Chapter 1. The waitress everyone mocked. The first thing people noticed about me was my weight. The second thing was that I never fought back. In a place like Bellissimo Italiano, one of the most luxurious restaurants in Naples, those two things made me an easy target. Every night, wealthy businessmen, politicians, celebrities, and people who would never remember my name filled the dining room beneath crystal chandeliers while I rushed between tables carrying trays heavier than my future. My name was Emma Rossi. I was 24 years old, worked double shifts almost every day, and spent most of my life believing that if I worked hard enough, eventually someone would see my value. Unfortunately, the world didn't seem interested in value. It cared about appearance, and according to most people around me, I failed that test. Emma, move faster. My manager's voice echoed from across the restaurant before I could even finish delivering a bottle of wine. Table 12 has been waiting. I nodded immediately and hurried toward the table, ignoring the familiar laughter coming from behind me. Sophia and 2 other waitresses stood near the service station. Careful, Sophia said loudly enough for everyone to hear. If she runs, we might need structural reinforcement. The women laughed. I forced a smile and kept walking. Experience had taught me that defending myself only encouraged people like Sophia. Some people didn't insult others because they were cruel. They did it because it entertained them. Unfortunately, I was often the entertainment. The dinner rush grew busier as the evening progressed. Orders piled up. The kitchen grew chaotic. Customers became impatient. Everything felt normal until I approached table 12. A man in an expensive suit looked me up and down with obvious amusement before snapping his fingers. "Excuse me." I stopped beside the table. "Yes, sir?" His smile widened. "Are you sure you should be carrying food?" Several people around him laughed immediately. My stomach tightened. I already knew where this was going. Maybe stop eating the restaurant profits and we'd get our meals faster. More laughter followed. I could feel every eye at the table studying me, waiting for a reaction, waiting for embarrassment, waiting for tears. Instead, I smiled politely. "Can I get you anything else, sir?" His expression immediately changed. He looked disappointed. Apparently, my humiliation had been part of the entertainment. When he realized I wasn't going to give him the response he wanted, he waved me away dismissively. I returned to the service station and pretended the encounter didn't bother me. Unfortunately, Sophia was waiting. "You know," she said, crossing her arms, "if I looked like you, I'd never leave the house." The comment landed harder than I wanted to admit. Not because she was right, because a small part of me still feared she might be. Before I could respond, my phone vibrated inside my pocket. I glanced down and immediately smiled. Marco. My boyfriend. Or at least he had been that morning. I answered quickly. "Hey." The silence on the other end instantly made my heart sink. "Emma, we need to talk." 4 words. 4 terrifying words. I closed my eyes briefly. "What happened?" Another pause followed. Then came the sentence that shattered something inside me. "I met someone." The restaurant seemed to disappear around me. The voices faded. The music vanished. Only those words remained. I met someone. I already knew what came next. Still, hearing it hurt. "Who is she?" I asked quietly. "A model. Of course she was. Beautiful, elegant, perfect, everything I wasn't." Marco continued talking, explaining, apologizing, trying to justify the betrayal. I stopped listening. Nothing he said mattered anymore. The relationship ended right there between dinner orders and wine glasses. I hung up without saying goodbye, slipped the phone back into my pocket and returned to work because bills didn't care about heartbreak. Less than an hour later, the atmosphere inside the restaurant suddenly changed. Managers adjusted their ties. Security guards moved toward the entrance. Employees straightened their uniforms. Even the customers seemed to notice something was different. Then the front doors opened. Silence spread across the dining room. At first, I didn't understand why. Then I saw him. Luca Moretti. Even before I recognized his face, I recognized the reaction he caused. Powerful men always carried a certain kind of gravity. People noticed them before they spoke. Luca Moretti walked into the restaurant wearing a perfectly tailored black suit. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair, sharp jawline, cold eyes. Everything about him radiated quiet authority. He wasn't loud. He wasn't arrogant. He didn't need to be. The entire room adjusted itself around his presence. Beside him walked an elegant older woman with silver hair and warm eyes. Maria Moretti, his mother. The contrast between them was striking. Luca looked like danger. Maria looked like kindness. Several bodyguards followed close behind. One of them immediately caught my attention. Tall, muscular, scar above one eyebrow. The kind of man who seemed permanently annoyed by the existence of other people. Dante Romano, head of security. Even from across the room, I could tell he wasn't someone who smiled often. The manager nearly tripped over himself, rushing to greet them. Luca barely acknowledged him. Instead, his gaze slowly swept across the restaurant. Observing, measuring, assessing. His eyes moved past me at first, and I immediately looked away. Men like Luca Moretti didn't notice women like me. They noticed actresses, socialites, and models, not waitresses carrying trays. Then something unexpected happened. Maria Moretti smiled at me. Not out of politeness. Not automatically. Genuinely. The warmth in her expression caught me off guard. Without thinking, I smiled back. A tiny moment. Meaningless, or so I thought. Then Luca followed his mother's gaze. Our eyes met for the first time. The reaction surprised me. Not because he was attractive, although he was, painfully so. No, what unsettled me was the intensity. For a brief second I felt seen, not judged, not mocked, Saiyan, as though he was actually looking at me instead of through me. The moment ended almost immediately. He turned away. Conversation resumed. The restaurant returned to normal. Yet something strange lingered inside my chest. I tried to ignore it and continued working. I had no idea that my life was about to change. I had no idea that the woman I had just smiled at was only minutes away from collapsing. I had no idea that I would soon save her life. And I definitely had no idea that somewhere inside the Moretti family existed a secret will containing a mystery that would eventually connect my name to theirs. 3 minutes later, Maria Moretti reached for her chest while seated at the table. 3 minutes later, her breathing began to fail. 3 minutes later, the entire restaurant would panic. And for the first time that night, Luca Moretti would truly notice me. Chapter 2. The Mafia Boss arrives. 3 minutes later, Maria Moretti collapsed in the middle of Bellissimo Italiano, and the entire restaurant forgot how to breathe. One moment she was seated beside her son, elegant and composed beneath the golden chandelier light, her hand resting lightly beside a glass of untouched red wine. The next moment, her fingers trembled, her face turned pale, and her breathing changed in a way nobody else seemed to notice at first. But I noticed. I had spent years helping my aunt care for sick neighbors back in the old district of Naples, years learning how to recognize small signs before they became disasters, and something about Maria's breathing sent fear straight through my chest. It wasn't panic. Not yet. It was that thin, dangerous silence before panic begins. I was carrying a tray of desserts toward table 9 when I saw her hand press against her chest. Her shoulders lifted sharply. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Luca was speaking quietly to one of his men. His cold profile turned away from her for only a second, but that second was enough. Maria tried to inhale again and failed. The tray slipped from my hands before I realized I had dropped it. Porcelain shattered across the marble floor. Several customers gasped. Sophia snapped, "Emma, what the hell are you doing?" But I was already moving. "Mrs. Moretti?" I called, pushing past a waiter who stood frozen with a wine bottle in his hand. Maria's eyes found mine, wide and terrified. She couldn't speak. She couldn't draw air. Luca turned at the sound of my voice, and in that same instant, his entire expression changed. The businessman vanished. The son appeared. "Mama?" His chair scraped violently against the floor as he stood. Dante moved first, blocking my path with one thick arm before I could reach the table. "Back away," he ordered. His voice was hard, dismissive, full of the same contempt I had heard all night from people who thought uniforms made servants invisible. "She's choking," I said, trying to step around him. Dante's eyes narrowed. I said, "Back away." Behind him, Maria's breathing became worse. A faint wheezing sound escaped her throat. Luca grabbed his mother's shoulder, his control cracking in a way that made the entire room feel suddenly smaller. "Call a doctor," he commanded. 3 bodyguards reached for their phones at once. The manager began stammering. Customers stood. Sophia whispered something cruel about me trying to get attention, but I barely heard her because Maria's lips were beginning to turn blue. "She doesn't have time," I said. "Louder now." Dante turned on me fully. "You are a waitress." The insult was clear, the warning was clearer. "Stay in your place." But something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the humiliation from table 12. Maybe it was Marco's betrayal still burning in my chest. Maybe it was the look in Maria's eyes, desperate and frightened despite all the wealth surrounding her. Whatever it was, I stopped shrinking. "And you're wasting seconds she doesn't have." The room went silent. Dante stared at me like I had just signed my own death sentence. Then Luca looked at me. Really looked at me. His eyes were no longer distant or unreadable. They were sharp, dangerous. It wasn't a request from a mafia boss. It was a plea from a son. I nodded once. "Yes, but he needs to move." Dante's jaw tightened, but Luca didn't hesitate. "Move." One word. Cold. Final. Dante stepped aside immediately. I reached Maria and lowered myself beside her chair. Up close, I could see the problem more clearly. Her throat was tight, her breathing shallow, her skin damp with cold sweat. "Did she eat anything new?" I asked quickly. Luca's eyes flashed toward the table. Shellfish was served nearby, but she didn't order it. I looked at the plate, the garnish, the sauce, the faint red swelling beginning near Maria's neck. "Allergic reaction," I said. "Severe." The manager began panicking. "We don't have epinephrine," I interrupted. "Does she carry an injector?" Luca looked toward Dante. Dante hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. "Her medical bag is in the car," he said. My blood ran cold. "Then get it." Luca's voice sliced through the restaurant. A guard ran instantly. But Maria's breathing was failing now, and every second stretched like a blade. I turned back to her, placing one hand gently on her shoulder. "Mrs. Moretti, look at me. Stay with me. Try to breathe slowly." Her eyes watered. Her hand clutched mine with surprising strength. The contact was warm, fragile, human. In that moment, she wasn't the mother of a feared man. She was simply a woman, terrified of dying. "Emma," Sophia hissed from somewhere behind me. "You don't know what you're doing." I ignored her. Dante did not. "If anything happens to her because of you, if you threaten her again while my mother is dying," Luca said quietly, "you'll regret speaking." The restaurant froze. Dante lowered his eyes. I didn't look at Luca, but I felt his attention on me like heat. I focused on Maria. I loosened the scarf around her neck, checked her pulse, helped position her forward, and kept speaking to her in a calm voice, even though my own heart was beating wildly. "You're doing well. Stay with me. Help is coming." The guard returned with the medical bag. Luca took it before anyone else could touch it and handed it to me. No hesitation, no doubt. That trust, sudden and intense, nearly shook my hands. Nearly. I found the injector, checked it, and administered it the way my aunt had taught me years ago during a crisis. For several seconds, nothing happened. Those seconds were the longest of my life. The restaurant remained frozen around us. Every wealthy customer, every cruel coworker, every armed bodyguard watching a curvy waitress kneel beside the most protected woman in Naples. Then Maria inhaled. A rough, painful, beautiful breath. Luca's entire body went still. Another breath followed. Then another. Color slowly returned to Maria's face. Her grip on my hand weakened, not because she was fading, but because the worst had passed. Relief crashed through me so hard I almost sat back on the floor. "She's responding," I whispered. Luca lowered himself beside his mother, one hand touching her hair with a tenderness that looked impossible on a man like him. "Mama." Maria turned her head weakly toward him, then toward me. Her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. 2 words. Soft. Broken. Worth more than every apology I had never received. The paramedics arrived minutes later, but by then Maria was stable. They praised the quick response, said the reaction could have been fatal if delayed, and asked who had administered the injection. Nobody answered at first. The entire room seemed uncomfortable with the truth. Finally, Maria lifted a trembling hand and pointed at me. She did. The paramedic looked surprised, then impressed. Luca said nothing. He simply watched me with an expression I couldn't understand. Not gratitude exactly. Something deeper. Something heavier. As if saving his mother had not only placed me in his debt, but placed me inside his world. I suddenly became aware of my uniform, the sauce stain near my sleeve, the broken porcelain still scattered across the floor, the hundreds of eyes staring at me. My confidence faded. I stepped back, wanting to disappear again. "I should clean this up," I murmured. Dante laughed under his breath. Typical. The word was quiet, but Luca heard it. So did I. Luca slowly turned his head toward his head of security. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "What did you say?" Dante's face tightened. "Nothing, sir." Luca stood. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. "A woman saved my mother's life, while you stood in her way." Silence. "You will apologize." Dante looked as if Luca had struck him. His eyes moved to me, full of humiliation and anger. For 1 second I thought he would refuse. Then survival won. "I'm sorry," he said stiffly. Luca's gaze remained hard. Again. Properly. Dante's jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might crack. He faced me fully. "I'm sorry, Miss Rossi." The restaurant went completely silent. Miss Rossi. No one there had ever called me that with respect. I didn't know what to do with it. I simply nodded. "It's fine." Luca's eyes shifted to me immediately. "No," he said, his voice low. "It isn't." Those 2 words followed me for the rest of the night. It isn't. Such a simple thing. Yet nobody had ever said that for me before. Nobody had ever looked at my humiliation and treated it as something unacceptable. I tried to return to work after Maria was taken to the hospital, but the restaurant no longer felt the same. Customers stared. Sophia avoided me. The manager suddenly spoke to me with forced politeness. Even the man from table 12, the one who had mocked my body, refused to meet my eyes after Luca's gaze lingered on him for half a second too long. I thought the night would end there. I thought saving Maria Moretti would become a strange memory, something I would carry quietly while life returned to normal. I was wrong. Near midnight, after the restaurant closed and the staff began cleaning, I passed the private wine corridor on my way to the kitchen. 2 voices drifted from the manager's office. One belonged to the manager. The other was unfamiliar, older, precise, almost legal. I should have kept walking. I knew better than to listen near closed doors, especially after a night involving the Moretti family. But then I heard my name. "Emma Rossi was the waitress?" the older man asked. My feet stopped. The manager sounded nervous. "Yes." "Why?" Papers rustled. A lock clicked. Then the older man said something that made my blood turn cold. "Because her name appears in the Moretti will." My breath caught. The Moretti will? That was impossible. I had no connection to that family. None. I was a waitress, an ordinary woman who paid rent late and bought cheap shoes because expensive ones were a dream. My name did not belong anywhere near a mafia dynasty's will. The manager whispered, "That can't be right." The older man answered, "It is not only right, it is dangerous." My fingers curled against the wall. Dangerous. The word slid down my spine like ice. Before I could hear more, a shadow moved behind me. I turned and found Luca Moretti standing at the end of the corridor. Alone. Silent. Watching me. I didn't know how long he had been there. I didn't know if he had heard the conversation too. His eyes moved from my face to the closed office door, then back to me. For 1 terrifying second, neither of us spoke. Then he stepped closer, his presence filling the narrow corridor until there was nowhere for me to hide. "Emma," he said quietly, and the sound of my name in his voice felt like a door closing behind my old life. "What did you hear?" I should have lied. I should have said nothing. I should have protected myself. Instead, I looked into the eyes of the most dangerous man in Naples and whispered, "Why is my name in your family's will?" Luca's expression changed so slightly that anyone else might have missed it. But I didn't. For the first time since he entered the restaurant, Luca Moretti looked genuinely shocked. And somehow that frightened me more than if he had looked angry. Chapter 3. The night everything changed. For several seconds after I asked why my name was in the Moretti family will, Luca Moretti said nothing. The narrow corridor behind Bellissimo Italiano seemed to shrink around us, trapping me between the closed manager's office and the most dangerous man I had ever stood near. The music in the dining room had stopped hours ago. The guests were gone. The chandeliers were dimmed. Only the faint hum of the kitchen refrigerators and the distant clatter of staff cleaning tables reminded me that the rest of the world still existed. Luca's dark eyes stayed fixed on mine, unreadable and sharp, as though he was deciding whether I was a victim, a threat, or a problem that had accidentally walked into his life carrying a tray of desserts. I wanted to step back, but the wall was already behind me. I wanted to apologize for overhearing something private, but the question had already escaped. Why was my name in your family's will? The longer he remained silent, the more afraid I became. Finally, Luca looked toward the closed office door. "Who is inside?" His voice was low enough that it barely moved through the corridor, yet somehow it felt more commanding than if he had shouted. I swallowed. "My manager? And an older man? I think he's a lawyer?" Luca's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. "Did he give a name?" I shook my head. "No." Another silence followed. Then Luca stepped past me and opened the office door without knocking. The scene inside froze instantly. My manager, Carlo, stood beside his desk with his face pale and sweaty. Across from him sat an elderly man in a navy suit, silver hair neatly combed back, one leather briefcase open on the table. Several documents lay spread between them, but the moment Luca entered, the older man closed the top folder with careful hands. Not fast enough. I saw the golden crest stamped into the paper, the same crest engraved on Luca's cufflinks. "Moretti." Carlo nearly stumbled backward. "Mr. Moretti, I can explain." Luca didn't look at him. His gaze remained on the older man. Vittorio. The name carried recognition, and not the friendly kind. The old lawyer slowly stood. Luca. My heart beat harder. They knew each other. Of course they did. Men like Luca Moretti didn't use family lawyers they barely knew. Vittorio glanced at me, and something strange passed over his face. Not surprise exactly. Recognition. As if he had expected to see me one day, just not tonight. Not in a stained waitress uniform with my hair coming loose from its pins and fear burning in my throat. Luca noticed that. "Look, why are you here?" he asked. Vittorio adjusted his glasses. "Because your mother collapsed in this restaurant, and because the woman who saved her is named in a sealed document your father ordered me never to open unless two conditions were met." The room went silent. Carlo looked like he wanted to disappear into the wall. I wished I could do the same. Luca's expression did not change, but the air around him did. It became colder, more dangerous. "What conditions?" Vittorio looked at me again. "Maria Moretti must be in mortal danger." A pause. "And Emma Rossi must be found alive." The words struck me so hard I almost forgot to breathe. Found alive. Not contacted. Not identified. Found alive. As though someone had been searching for me. As though someone expected I might not survive. "That doesn't make sense," I whispered. My voice sounded small, even to me. Luca finally turned toward me, and for the first time I saw something beneath the control. Concern, perhaps. Or suspicion. Maybe both. "No," he said quietly. "It doesn't." Vittorio reached for the sealed envelope inside his briefcase. Luca's hand moved faster. He caught the lawyer's wrist before the envelope left the case. The movement wasn't violent, but the warning was clear. "Not here." Vittorio held his gaze. "Then where?" Luca looked toward Carlo. "Leave." Carlo immediately nodded. Of course, sir. He grabbed nothing, asked nothing, and fled the office like a man who had just been granted a second life. I started to follow because surely this was not a conversation meant for me. Luca stopped me with one word. Stay. I froze. Vittorio's eyes moved between us, cautious and curious. She has a right to know. Luca's gaze sharpened. She also has a right to remain alive. The sentence turned my blood cold. Before I could ask what he meant, Luca removed his phone and made one call. Dante. Private room. Now. No staff. No cameras. And bring 2 men I trust. He ended the call, then looked at me. You are coming with me. It was not a request. I knew I should have protested. I should have said I had work, or that I wanted to go home, or that none of this had anything to do with me. But my name was in a mafia will. A lawyer had just said I needed to be found alive, and the only person in the room who seemed capable of keeping danger away was the same man who made danger feel closer than ever. So I followed. Luca led us through a private passage I had cleaned hundreds of times but never entered. Behind the wine corridor was a hidden door disguised by shelves of imported Barolo, and behind that door was another world. A private dining room reserved for the kind of guests no one mentioned by name. The walls were dark wood, the table long and polished, the windows covered by heavy curtains. Security cameras had been turned away. 2 guards stood outside. Dante waited inside, his face still hard from the humiliation earlier, though now it carried something else too. Irritation, suspicion, dislike. His eyes flicked toward me. Why is she here? Luca removed his suit jacket and laid it over the back of a chair. Because this concerns her. Dante's mouth tightened. With respect, boss, she is a waitress. Luca looked at him, not angrily, worse, calmly. And tonight that waitress did what my head of security failed to do. Dante went completely still. The words hit their target perfectly. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Luca pulled out a chair. But instead of sitting, he gestured toward it. At first I didn't understand. Then I realized he meant for me to sit. The gesture was small, but everyone noticed. Dante noticed. Vittorio noticed. I definitely noticed. Nobody had ever pulled out a chair for me in a room like that. Not even Marco on our anniversary. I sat carefully, trying not to show how badly my hands were trembling. Vittorio placed the sealed envelope on the table. The golden crest looked old and heavy, pressed into red wax. This was written by your father 6 months before his death, he said to Luca. He gave me strict instructions. If Maria ever suffered a life-threatening attack and Emma Rossi was present, I was to open the first layer of instructions. Luca's eyes narrowed. Attack? Vittorio hesitated. Your father believed your mother would one day be targeted through food. The words changed the room instantly. My heart stopped. Food? I whispered. Luca's gaze snapped toward the empty space, as if replaying the entire dinner in his mind. The shellfish, the sauce, the garnish, the timing, Maria's reaction. You're saying my mother's collapse wasn't accidental. Vittorio did not answer quickly enough. That was answer enough. Dante stepped forward. Impossible. Every dish was checked. Luca's eyes cut toward him. By whom? Dante's jaw flexed. My team. Then your team missed something. The accusation sat between them like a loaded gun. Dante looked furious, but he said nothing. I suddenly remembered the table. The plate near Maria, the faint smear of sauce on the edge of her glass. A detail I hadn't understood at the time. My mouth went dry. There was sauce on her glass. Every head turned toward me. I shrank slightly under the attention, then forced myself to continue. Not much. Just a little near the rim. I thought maybe someone had touched it while serving, but she hadn't eaten the shellfish dish. If someone wanted to trigger a reaction, they wouldn't need to put it on her plate. They'd only need it where she would touch it. The silence that followed was terrifying. Luca stared at me as if seeing me differently all over again. Dante looked angry, but beneath the anger was discomfort. Vittorio looked almost relieved, as if I had confirmed something he had feared. Luca leaned forward, placing both hands on the table. Who served the wine? Dante said nothing. I answered before I could stop myself. Sophia. Dante's eyes cut toward me. Careful. The warning was sharp. I looked at him, my fear battling with something stronger. I'm not accusing her. I'm telling you what I saw. Luca's attention shifted to Dante. Bring her in. Dante hesitated. Just 1 second. But Luca noticed. So did I. Now, Luca said. Dante left, and the room became silent again. I could feel my pulse in my wrists, in my throat, behind my eyes. I wanted to disappear. Yet a strange part of me felt awake, in a way I hadn't in years. People had spent so long telling me I was useless that I had nearly believed them. But tonight, my hands had saved Maria Moretti. My eyes had noticed what trained guards had missed. My voice had spoken when silence would have been safer. For the first time in a long time, I wondered if maybe I had been wrong about myself. Maybe I wasn't invisible because I lacked value. Maybe I was invisible because the wrong people had been looking. Sophia arrived 5 minutes later, pale beneath her perfect makeup. She tried to smile when she saw Luca, but the smile died when she noticed me sitting at the table. Mr. Moretti, she said softly, adjusting her hair. Is everything all right? Luca remained standing. You served my mother's wine. Sophia blinked. Yes, sir. I served many tables. Did you touch her glass? Of course. I placed it down. Did anyone else touch it? Sophia hesitated. The hesitation was tiny. Fatal. I don't remember. Luca's eyes darkened. Try. She glanced at Dante, then at me. That glance told me something. Not guilt, perhaps, but fear. Maybe one of the bussers, she said quickly. The restaurant was busy. I remembered the glass. I remembered Sophia leaning close to the table. I remembered her laughing with a guest seconds before Maria touched the rim. But I also remembered another detail. A man in a gray suit standing near the service station. He had not been a customer. He had not been staff. He had handed Sophia something small wrapped in a napkin. At the time, I had thought nothing of it. Now the memory returned with painful clarity. Someone gave her something. The words left my mouth before I could soften them. Sophia's face changed instantly. Luca turned toward me. Who? I closed my eyes for a second, rebuilding the image from memory. Gray suit, gold ring, crooked little finger, a faint scar near the mouth. A man near the service station. Gray suit. He had a gold ring on his right hand and a crooked finger. He gave Sophia a folded napkin. Sophia exploded. She's lying. The outburst echoed across the private room. Luca didn't move. He didn't need to. Sophia realized her mistake immediately. Vittorio carefully opened the outer layer of the envelope, while Luca watched Sophia like a judge watching a confession begin. Inside was a single page, written in firm handwriting. Luca read it silently. The longer he read, the more the room seemed to darken. Finally, he handed the page to me. I didn't want to take it. I didn't want anything to do with Moretti's secrets. But my fingers moved anyway. The note was short. If Maria is harmed and Emma Rossi is found near her, trust the girl before you trust the bloodline. My breath caught. Trust the girl before you trust the bloodline. I looked up slowly. Luca's expression had turned unreadable again, but this time I understood why. The note was not simply about me. It was a warning. Someone inside the Moretti family could not be trusted. Someone close enough to harm Maria. Someone dangerous enough that Luca's dead father had prepared for this night, years in advance. Sophia began crying then, but the tears came too late. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear, I didn't know what it was. He told me it was a special garnish for the table. He said it came from the kitchen. Dante cursed under his breath. Luca stepped closer to her. Who was he? Sophia shook her head violently. I don't know. Luca's voice dropped. Sophia. One word. A warning. A promise. A threat. She broke immediately. He said his name was Enzo. That's all I know. He paid me 2,000 euros just to place the napkin near the wine service. I thought it was some rich man's joke. I didn't know she would almost die. The room went silent again. Dante looked furious, though I couldn't tell whether he was angry at Sophia, at himself, or at me for being right. Luca turned toward him. Find Enzo. Dante nodded. And Sophia? Luca looked at the waitress who had mocked me hours earlier, the woman who had enjoyed my humiliation, the woman whose greed had nearly killed his mother. She is finished here. Sophia sobbed. Please, Mr. Moretti, you were finished the moment you chose money over a woman's life. His voice was quiet, brutal, final. Security removed Sophia from the room. I should have felt satisfied. Maybe part of me did. But mostly I felt cold. Because if Sophia was telling the truth, she had not planned the attack. She had been used, which meant the real enemy was still outside. Or worse, inside. Vittorio gathered the documents with careful hands, but Luca stopped him. Open the next layer. The lawyer stiffened. I cannot. Luca's eyes hardened. You can. Not until Maria wakes and confirms the phrase, your father left with her. Luca's control cracked for the briefest second. My mother is in the hospital because someone poisoned her. And the next layer of the will may be exactly what they want revealed too soon, Vittorio replied. Your father structured this for a reason. The two men stared at each other, both stubborn, both frightened in different ways. Then Luca's phone rang. He answered immediately. His expression changed. Mama? My heart lifted. Maria was awake. I couldn't hear her voice, only Luca's silence as he listened. Then his eyes moved to me. Slowly. Intensely. She wants to see Emma. The hospital was quieter than I expected. Or maybe it only seemed quiet because Luca's men controlled the entire private floor. Doctors moved carefully. Nurses whispered. Guards stood at every corner. I walked beside Luca through the corridor, feeling painfully aware of my cheap shoes and stained uniform. He noticed. Of course he did. You are safe, he said without looking at me. I almost laughed. That's not exactly what I was thinking. For the first time that night, the corner of his mouth moved slightly. Almost a smile. Almost. Then what were you thinking? I looked down at myself. That I don't belong here. Luca stopped walking. I took 2 more steps before realizing and turned back. He looked at me with an expression that made my chest tighten. You saved my mother's life. A pause. You belong anywhere I say you belong. The words were possessive, arrogant, impossible. They should have annoyed me. Instead, warmth spread through me before I could stop it. I didn't answer. I couldn't. So I followed him into Maria Moretti's hospital room. Maria looked fragile against the white pillows, but when she saw me, her eyes warmed immediately. There she is, she whispered. I moved closer awkwardly. How are you feeling? Alive because of you. My throat tightened. I just did what anyone would have done. Luca's voice came from behind me. No, you didn't. Maria smiled faintly, then reached for my hand. Her fingers were cool, but her grip was steady. Your mother had kind eyes. The words made the room tilt. My mother? I stared at her. You knew my mother? Maria's smile faded into sadness. Long ago. Luca stepped closer. Mama. The warning in his voice was gentle but urgent. Maria ignored it. Her gaze remained on me. Your family did more for ours than you know. My heart pounded. What does that mean? Before Maria could answer, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then the hospital monitors beeped sharply. A nurse outside shouted. Luca moved instantly, pulling me behind him with one arm before I understood what was happening. The hallway erupted in noise. Guards shouted. Footsteps thundered. Somewhere nearby, glass shattered. Dante's voice roared through the corridor. Lock it down! Luca pushed me behind his body, shielding both me and his mother from the doorway. His hand reached beneath his jacket. In that terrifying second, the truth became clear. The attack at the restaurant had failed. Maria had survived. I had seen too much. And now someone had come to finish what they started. Luca turned his head just enough for me to hear his voice, low and deadly. Stay behind me. My fingers tightened around Maria's hand. The door handle began to move. Slowly, deliberately. Someone was on the other side. Luca's entire body went still, every part of him becoming the weapon the world whispered about. And as the door started to open, I realized the secret will was no longer just a mystery. It was a death sentence. Chapter 4. The Girl Who Knew Too Much. The hospital corridor remained locked down for nearly 2 hours after the attempted intrusion, yet the tension refused to leave. Armed guards stood outside every entrance. Doctors whispered instead of speaking normally. Nurses avoided eye contact whenever Luca Moretti walked past. The entire floor felt like a fortress under siege. I sat beside Maria Moretti's hospital bed watching the heart monitor rise and fall in steady rhythms while trying to convince myself that everything would somehow return to normal. It was a ridiculous thought. Nothing about my life was normal anymore. Less than 24 hours earlier, I had been an ordinary waitress worried about rent, heartbreak, and surviving another exhausting shift. Now I was sitting inside a private hospital wing, protected by armed men because my name had appeared inside a secret mafia will. The absurdity of it should have made me laugh. Instead, it terrified me. Maria slept peacefully for most of the night. Every few minutes I checked her breathing without even realizing I was doing it. Years of helping my aunt care for elderly patients had trained me to notice things automatically. Changes in skin color, breathing patterns, small signs that most people missed. Apparently Luca noticed my habit because shortly before dawn he walked into the room carrying 2 cups of coffee and paused beside the bed. "You've checked her pulse 6 times in 10 minutes. I looked up embarrassed. "Sorry." A faint crease appeared between his brows. "Why are you apologizing?" The question surprised me. I stared at him, because I keep acting like I'm responsible for her. Luca placed 1 coffee beside me before taking the chair across from mine. "You are responsible for her." I blinked. "What?" His gaze moved toward his sleeping mother. If you hadn't noticed the reaction, she would be dead. The blunt honesty left no room for argument. I looked down at the coffee cup, unsure how to respond. People weren't supposed to owe me things. They certainly weren't supposed to say it out loud. Luca seemed to sense my discomfort immediately. "You're not used to being appreciated, are you?" The question hit far too close to the truth. I laughed softly. "That's a strange thing to ask. It's a simple thing to observe." His answer came without hesitation. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The quiet felt strangely comfortable. Dangerous, but comfortable. The silence broke when Maria finally opened her eyes. The moment she saw me, her expression softened. The moment she saw Luca, it softened even more. "You both look exhausted." Her voice sounded weak but steady. Relief immediately filled the room. Luca stood and moved beside her bed. The transformation still fascinated me. Around everyone else, he was controlled, distant, intimidating. Around his mother, he became something else entirely. Human. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Maria smiled faintly. "Alive." Then she turned toward me. "Because of Emma." My cheeks warmed instantly. Luca's eyes briefly met mine. There was something different in them now. Not suspicion, not curiosity, respect. The realization made my stomach do something uncomfortable. Several hours later, after doctors completed another round of examinations, Maria asked for lunch. The hospital kitchen delivered a tray that looked expensive, but somehow managed to taste worse than cafeteria food. Maria poked at it twice before pushing it away. "I'd rather starve." Luca sighed. "Mama, I mean it." She folded her arms like a stubborn child. "This is terrible." I couldn't stop myself from smiling. Maria noticed immediately. "What?" she asked. I hesitated. Nothing. Her eyes narrowed. "Emma." I laughed softly. "It's just..." Another pause. "I could make something better." The room went silent. Maria looked delighted. Luca looked intrigued. I instantly regretted speaking. "I didn't mean good." Maria interrupted immediately. "Then you will." 20 minutes later, I somehow found myself standing inside the private hospital kitchen wearing an apron while 3 confused cooks watched me take control of their workspace. It should have felt ridiculous. Instead, it felt familiar. Comfortable. Safe. Cooking had always been the one place where my mind stopped worrying. My mother used to say, Food revealed a person's heart. The more love someone carried, the better they cooked. I wasn't sure if that was true, but I knew I missed her every time I stepped into a kitchen. I prepared a simple meal: fresh herbs, vegetable broth, handmade pasta, nothing complicated, nothing expensive, just food made with care. 45 minutes later, I carried the tray into Maria's room. The smell reached her before I did. Her face immediately lit up. That smells like home. Something inside my chest tightened. She tasted one spoonful and closed her eyes. For a moment, she looked emotional. "Your mother used to cook exactly like this." I froze. Luca noticed. So did Maria. The room became quiet again. Slowly, Maria placed the spoon down. "Emma, there is something you deserve to know." My heartbeat accelerated. "About my parents?" Maria nodded. "About why your name appears in the will?" Luca straightened instantly. Even he hadn't heard this part. Maria took a slow breath. "Many years ago, your father saved Antonio Moretti's life." The revelation struck like lightning. I stared at her in disbelief. Maria continued. "Not once. Twice." Every word pulled me deeper into a mystery I never knew existed. She explained how my parents had hidden Luca's father during a violent conflict, how they had refused payment, how they had protected a family they barely knew because it was the right thing to do. The more she spoke, the more impossible everything sounded. Yet something deep inside me believed her. Maybe because I knew my parents, they would have done exactly that. The conversation ended abruptly when Vittorio arrived, carrying another sealed folder. The old lawyer looked troubled. More troubled than before. "We have a problem," he said. Luca immediately stood. "What happened?" Vittorio placed the folder on the table. "Someone tried to access the second section of the will." The room went cold. Maria's expression darkened. "Who?" Vittorio shook his head. "We don't know." Luca's jaw tightened. "How?" The lawyer opened the folder and removed several photographs. Security images. Blurry. Distorted. Yet one detail remained visible: a figure leaving the archive building shortly after midnight. My stomach twisted. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit. Even from the grainy image, the resemblance was unmistakable. Dante Romano. Luca stared at the photographs for several long seconds. Maria looked equally shocked. I waited for him to react. He didn't. That worried me more than anger would have. Finally, Luca lowered the images. "No." Vittorio frowned. "The footage is clear." Luca's eyes hardened. "The footage is convenient." Silence followed. Maria slowly nodded. "I agree." The lawyer looked surprised. "You think someone framed him?" Luca's gaze shifted toward the window overlooking Naples. "I think someone wants me looking in the wrong direction." The room fell silent again. For the first time since this nightmare began, I realized something important. Every new answer created two new questions. Every secret revealed another secret beneath it. Every clue pointed toward someone different. And somehow, despite being the least powerful person involved, I was standing at the center of all of it. Then Luca's phone vibrated. He answered immediately. Whatever he heard caused every trace of calm to disappear from his face. "When?" he asked. A pause followed, then another. His expression darkened further. "Understood." He ended the call and looked directly at me. "Pack a bag." My pulse quickened. "Why?" His answer came instantly. "Because someone just broke into Vittorio's office." The room froze. "What did they take?" Maria asked quietly. Luca's gaze never left mine. "The only copy of the will mentioning Emma Rossi." A chill ran down my spine. "And there's more," he added. "The thief left a message." Nobody spoke. Luca finally said the words that made my blood run cold. "Tell the girl she's next." For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Luca stepped closer, his expression colder than I had ever seen it. "You're coming to the Moretti estate." It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a request. It was a decision. And judging by the look in his eyes, arguing would be pointless. The terrifying part wasn't that someone wanted the will. It wasn't even that someone wanted me. The terrifying part was the realization that whoever was behind all of this already knew exactly where to find me. And if Luca Moretti was right, the real enemy wasn't Dante Romano. The real enemy was still hidden, watching, waiting, and now they had officially declared war. Chapter 5. The Secret Will. The first morning inside the Moretti estate felt strangely unreal. Emma woke to the distant sound of waves crashing against the cliffs below and spent several seconds staring at the unfamiliar ceiling above her bed, trying to remember how her life had changed so completely in less than 3 days. The answer came immediately. Maria Moretti. The poisoning. The will. Luca. Every road somehow led back to the same mystery. By the time she joined the others in the estate's private library, she could already feel the tension waiting inside the room. Maria sat beside the fireplace, looking far stronger than she had in the hospital. Luca stood near one of the tall windows overlooking the sea, speaking quietly with Dante. Bianca occupied a chair near the center table, dressed elegantly as always, though the irritation in her eyes became obvious the moment she saw Emma enter. Vittorio arrived shortly afterward, carrying a black metal case secured with 2 locks. The room fell silent immediately. Everyone understood that whatever answers existed were inside that case. Vittorio placed it carefully on the table and unlocked it while every pair of eyes followed the movement. The metallic clicks sounded unnaturally loud. Then he removed a sealed envelope marked with the Moretti family crest and took a slow breath before speaking. This section of Antonio Moretti's will was intended to remain hidden until Emma Rossi was identified. Hearing her name inside such a sentence made Emma's stomach tighten. She still felt like an outsider standing in the middle of someone else's story. Vittorio opened the document and began reading. To my son Luca, if you are reading this, then fate has finally delivered the daughter of 2 people whose courage changed the future of our family. The room became perfectly still. Emma felt every heartbeat. 26 years ago, Giovanni Rossi and Elena Rossi saved my life. When doing so, placed their own family at risk. Debts like that cannot be repaid through money alone. Therefore, should their daughter ever be found, the promise I made to her parents must be honored. Vittorio paused briefly before continuing. Half ownership of La Stella shall belong to Emma Rossi. The silence that followed felt endless. Emma genuinely thought she had misunderstood. Half ownership? Her eyes moved toward Maria, then Luca, then Vittorio, hoping someone would explain why nobody seemed surprised except her. Bianca was the first person to break the silence. This is ridiculous. Her voice carried enough disbelief to make everyone look toward her. A waitress inherits part of a Moretti property? Luca slowly turned his head. The movement alone was enough to make Bianca lower her voice. It isn't a matter of opinion, he said calmly. It's a matter of law. Bianca laughed once, though there was no humor in the sound. Surely your father didn't intend for a complete stranger to become part owner of a family asset. Emma felt the familiar sting of humiliation. Complete stranger, waitress, outsider. Words like that had followed her entire life. But before she could retreat into old insecurities, Maria spoke. Emma stopped being a stranger the moment she saved my life. Bianca fell silent, not because she agreed, because she knew arguing with Maria would accomplish nothing. Vittorio continued reading. According to Antonio Moretti's notes, La Stella was not simply a restaurant. Decades earlier, it had served as neutral ground during a period when alliances throughout Sicily were fragile and dangerous. Agreements had been made there. Documents had been hidden there. Secrets had been protected there. Antonio believed something of enormous value remained connected to the property, though he never specified exactly what. The more Vittorio explained, the more Emma realized the inheritance itself might not be the real prize. Someone had poisoned Maria. Someone had stolen part of the will. Someone had threatened Emma directly. Nobody risked murder over an old restaurant, which meant something else was hidden beneath the surface. The realization became impossible to ignore when Vittorio revealed another page. Antonio had written only a single sentence beneath the final section. Find the truth beneath La Stella before the wrong people do. Even Luca seemed unsettled by that instruction. What truth? He asked. Vittorio shook his head. Antonio never explained. Maria frowned. That doesn't sound like him. No, Vittorio admitted. It doesn't. The conversation continued for nearly an hour. But every new answer only created additional questions. Eventually, the meeting ended. Bianca left first, clearly furious. Maria returned to her room to rest. Dante resumed coordinating security. Vittorio remained behind to organize the documents. Emma found herself standing alone beside one of the library shelves trying to process everything she had learned. Half ownership of a historic restaurant, a hidden promise made by her parents decades ago, a secret important enough to inspire violence. Nothing made sense. You look overwhelmed. Luca's voice came from behind her. Emma laughed softly. That's because I am. He moved beside her and glanced toward the documents spread across the table. Most people would be excited. Most people aren't discovering that their entire life was built on information nobody bothered to tell them. The answer earned the faintest trace of a smile. Fair point. The silence that followed felt comfortable in a way Emma wasn't prepared for. Dangerous men weren't supposed to feel comforting, yet Luca's presence somehow did. Before either of them could continue, the library doors opened abruptly. Dante entered carrying his phone. One look at his face erased every trace of calm. We found Enzo. Luca immediately straightened. The room seemed to tighten around the words. Enzo, the man connected to Maria's poisoning. The only lead they had. Where? Luca asked. Dante hesitated for a fraction of a second. In a warehouse outside Naples. Hope briefly appeared before Dante finished the sentence. He's dead. The silence afterward felt heavier than any silence before it. Emma's stomach dropped. Luca's expression hardened instantly. Another witness gone. Another trail cut short. Dante stepped forward and placed a photograph on the table. There was a message. Luca picked up the image first. Whatever he saw caused something dark to flash through his eyes. He handed it to Emma. The photograph showed Enzo's body lying on a concrete floor, but it wasn't the body that mattered. Painted across the wall behind him in large black letters were 3 simple words. The girl knows. Emma felt ice spread through her veins. The message wasn't directed at Luca. It wasn't directed at the Moretti family. It was directed at her. Whoever was behind the poisoning knew her name, knew her involvement, knew she existed. And worse, they believed she possessed information important enough to kill for. The room remained silent for several long seconds before Dante spoke again. There's something else. Nobody liked the sound of that. What? Luca asked. Dante removed another photograph and placed it beside the first. This one showed a damaged frame recovered from Enzo's warehouse. Inside was an old photograph. Antonio Moretti, Maria Moretti, Giovanni Rossi, Elena Rossi, and a 5th person whose face had been deliberately cut away. Emma stared at the image. Her pulse accelerated immediately. The same photograph, the same missing man, the same mystery. Who is he? She whispered. Nobody answered, because nobody knew. Then Dante said something that made the room even colder. Whoever removed him from the photograph did it recently. Luca's eyes narrowed. How recently? Dante looked directly at him. Within the last week. The implication struck everyone at once. Someone had been searching for the same secret Antonio Moretti wanted protected. Someone had known exactly where to look, and someone had started moving before Emma ever walked into Bellissimo Italiano, which meant the attack on Maria wasn't the beginning. It was only the latest move in a game that had started decades ago. Emma stared at the photograph, unable to look away from the empty space where the man's face should have been. A strange feeling settled deep inside her chest. Not fear, not exactly. Recognition. As though she had seen something connected to him before without realizing it. She opened her mouth to speak. Then stopped. Because suddenly she remembered a photograph from her childhood. An old picture hidden inside a box after her parents died. A picture she hadn't thought about in years. And standing beside her father in that photograph was a man whose face looked frighteningly similar to the silhouette missing from the frame. Emma slowly raised her eyes toward Luca. I think. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. I think I've seen him before. Every person in the room went completely still. Because if Emma was right, then the key to Antonio Moretti's secret had never been hidden inside the will. It had been hidden inside her memories all along. Chapter 6. Enemies emerge. The message painted behind Enzo's body followed Emma everywhere. The girl knows. 3 simple words. 3 terrifying words. The problem was that Emma wasn't even sure what she supposedly knew. For the next several days, the Moretti estate became a prison disguised as paradise. Security doubled. Armed guards appeared outside every corridor. Additional cameras were installed throughout the property. Luca approved every visitor personally and refused to allow Emma outside the estate walls without protection. Officially, the precautions existed because someone had poisoned Maria Moretti and murdered a witness. Unofficially, everyone understood the truth. Emma Rossi had become part of the game, whether she wanted to or not. The realization settled heavily over her life. Every conversation seemed connected to hidden agendas. Every glance carried questions. Every piece of information created new mysteries. Yet among all the uncertainty, one thing became impossible to ignore. Luca Moretti no longer treated her like a guest. He treated her like someone under his protection. The difference was subtle, but Emma noticed it. He checked whether she had eaten. He asked where she was going. He appeared whenever Bianca pushed too far. He never called attention to any of it, yet somehow he was always there. The possessiveness should have irritated her. Instead, it made her feel safer than she cared to admit. Unfortunately, Bianca noticed too. The wealthy heiress had spent years assuming her future would eventually include Luca Moretti. She understood the estate. She understood the family. She understood the rules. Emma represented something Bianca couldn't control, and people like Bianca hated losing control. The tension finally erupted inside the greenhouse overlooking the sea. Emma had gone there seeking a few moments of peace among the flowers and citrus trees. Instead, she found Bianca waiting. The woman's smile appeared immediately. It wasn't friendly. "You seemed comfortable here." Emma already knew where the conversation was heading. "I'm trying to survive, not redecorate." Bianca laughed softly. "Funny." A pause followed. "Tell me something. Do you really believe you belong here?" Emma remained silent. Bianca moved closer. "A few days ago, you were carrying food between tables. Now you're sitting beside Maria Moretti and discussing family inheritances. Surely even you understand how ridiculous that sounds." The words stung because part of Emma still asked herself the same question every night. Bianca noticed the hesitation and pressed harder. "You don't fit into this world. Everyone sees it." Emma finally looked at her. "Then why are you so worried about me?" For the first time, Bianca's smile disappeared. The answer arrived before Bianca could respond. "Because she sees you as competition." Luca's voice cut through the greenhouse. Both women turned. He stood near the entrance with his hands in his pockets and an expression that made Bianca immediately step backward. "Luca, I wasn't, you were." His interruption came quietly. That somehow made it worse. Bianca opened her mouth again, then thought better of it. Luca's attention shifted toward Emma. "Walk with me." There was no discussion after that. Bianca remained behind while Luca guided Emma toward the cliffside path overlooking the Mediterranean. Neither spoke for several minutes. The ocean stretched endlessly beneath them. The silence felt strangely comfortable. Eventually, Emma sighed. "You don't have to keep rescuing me." A faint smile touched the corner of Luca's mouth. "Who said I was rescuing you?" Emma rolled her eyes. "Right." The smile lingered for another second before disappearing. Then his expression hardened. "We found something." The change in tone immediately caught her attention. "About the photograph?" Luca nodded. "Dante traced where it came from." Emma's pulse quickened. The image with the missing face had haunted her ever since Vittorio revealed it. "And?" Luca looked toward the sea. "I think you're right." She frowned. "About what?" His eyes returned to hers. "You've seen him before." The possibility stayed with Emma for the rest of the day. She spent hours searching through memories she hadn't touched in years. Childhood birthdays, family dinners, the bakery, her parents. Nothing appeared clearly enough. Yet the feeling remained. She knew that face. Somewhere deep inside her memory, she knew it. That evening, the frustration became unbearable. "I need to go home." The statement immediately earned a disapproving look from Luca. They were alone inside his study, reviewing old family records, when she finally said it. "No." Emma sighed. "You don't even know why." Because I know you. The answer surprised her. Luca leaned back in his chair. You think the answer is hidden somewhere inside your apartment? Emma hesitated. Maybe. Luca's expression remained calm. And maybe the people threatening you think the same thing. The argument lasted nearly 20 minutes. Eventually, a compromise emerged. Emma could return home. With security. Heavy security. Ridiculously excessive security. 3 vehicles left the estate shortly before sunset. Dante led the convoy. Luca joined personally, despite having a dozen reasons not to. Nobody pointed that out. The moment Emma stepped into her apartment, she knew something was wrong. Nothing appeared damaged, nothing appeared stolen. Yet everything felt different. The sensation came from years of familiarity. Small details, tiny changes. Things most people would never notice. Her mother's recipe box sat inside a drawer instead of on the counter. A photograph frame angled slightly differently. A storage closet left half an inch open. Luca saw the realization on her face immediately. Someone was here. Emma nodded slowly. Dante and his men searched the apartment while she tried to ignore the growing knot in her stomach. The results only confirmed her fears. The intruder had been professional. Careful. Deliberate. They weren't looking for valuables. They were looking for information. Hours later, while searching through old boxes, Emma finally found the photograph she remembered. The instant she saw it, her heartbeat accelerated. Her father stood smiling beside a man she hadn't thought about in years, a tall man with dark hair and sharp features, the same man whose face had been removed from the Moretti photograph. The room became silent. Luca stared. Dante stared. Emma stared. Nobody spoke until Dante slowly exhaled. I know him. Luca's attention shifted instantly. Who? Dante looked genuinely disturbed. More disturbed than Emma had ever seen him. That's Salvatore Moretti. The name meant nothing to Emma. It clearly meant everything to Luca. His expression changed immediately. Impossible. Dante shook his head. I thought so too. A terrible silence followed. Because Salvatore Moretti wasn't just another relative. He was Antonio Moretti's brother, Luca's uncle, officially dead for more than 20 years. Yet there he was, standing beside Emma's father in a photograph that should not exist. The implications hit everyone at once. If Salvatore truly died decades ago, why had someone worked so hard to erase him? Why was his face removed from every image? And why did Emma's parents know him? Nobody had time to answer because Dante's phone rang. The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds. By the end, every trace of color had disappeared from his face. Luca noticed immediately. What happened? Dante lowered the phone slowly. There's been another attack. Every muscle in Luca's body tightened. Where? Dante's answer came quietly. Too quietly. The estate. Emma felt cold. Very cold. Maria? Luca asked. Dante nodded. Someone just tried to kill her again. The room fell silent. Because at that moment, one terrible truth became impossible to ignore. Whoever stood behind the poisoning, the will, the missing photographs, and the murders wasn't chasing old secrets anymore. They were accelerating. They were running out of patience. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Luca Moretti looked genuinely worried. Not about the inheritance, not about the investigation, about the people he cared about. Emma suddenly realized she was one of them, and somehow, that frightened her almost as much as the enemy waiting in the shadows. Chapter 7. The Hidden Truth. The attack on Maria Moretti changed everything. Until that moment, Luca had been treating the investigation as a dangerous family mystery. After the attack, it became a war. The difference was immediate. Security throughout the estate tripled overnight. Armed guards appeared outside every wing. Nobody entered or left the property without authorization. Every phone call was monitored. Every vehicle was inspected. Every employee was investigated. Yet despite all the precautions, the most dangerous realization wasn't that someone had tried to kill Maria again. It was that someone had known exactly how to reach her. Someone understood the estate. Someone understood the security systems. Someone understood the family. The enemy wasn't watching from outside anymore. The enemy was already close. Very close. Emma spent most of the following day replaying the discovery from her apartment. Salvatore Moretti. The name refused to leave her thoughts. Officially, he had died more than 20 years ago. Yet her father's photograph proved he had remained connected to the Rossi family long after his supposed death. The contradiction haunted her. Every answer seemed to create new questions. Why had her parents hidden that connection? Why had Antonio Moretti spent decades protecting information connected to Salvatore? And why were people still killing to keep those secrets buried? The questions followed her through the estate until Maria finally asked to see her privately. The older woman seemed stronger physically, but something had changed behind her eyes. Fear. Not for herself, for Luca, for Emma, for the family. She led Emma into a small sitting room overlooking the sea and placed an old wooden box on the table between them. The box looked ancient. The brass lock was tarnished. The edges were worn smooth by time. Maria stared at it for several seconds before speaking. Antonio gave me this shortly before he died. Emma immediately felt her pulse quicken. What's inside? Maria's expression darkened. Answers. Slowly, she unlocked the box and lifted the lid. The first thing Emma noticed was the smell. Old paper. Dust. Time itself. Inside rested dozens of letters tied together with fading ribbon. Some were addressed to Antonio, others to Maria. Then Emma saw one bearing a name she hadn't expected. Giovanni Rossi. Her father. For a moment, she simply stared. The sight of his handwriting alone almost brought tears to her eyes. Maria carefully handed her the letter. Read it. Emma unfolded the pages with trembling fingers. The words immediately transported her back to a life she thought she had lost forever. Her father's voice seemed alive inside every sentence. He wrote about the bakery, about Elena, about protecting family. Then halfway through the letter, the tone changed. The warmth disappeared. Concern replaced it. Fear followed. Emma's eyes moved faster. Her heartbeat accelerated. Then she found the sentence that changed everything. If Salvatore discovers what was hidden beneath La Stella, none of us will survive the consequences. The room seemed to tilt. Emma read the sentence again. Then again. Salvatore. Not in the past tense. Not as a dead man. As a threat. An active threat. She looked up slowly. Maria, who exactly was Salvatore? The older woman closed her eyes briefly before answering. Antonio's younger brother. A pause followed. And the man responsible for destroying this family. The words landed heavily. Maria spent the next hour explaining pieces of a history even Luca never fully understood. According to her, Salvatore had once been considered brilliant, ambitious, charismatic. But ambition eventually became obsession. He wanted control. He wanted power. Most importantly, he wanted something Antonio refused to give him. Nobody knew exactly what happened between the brothers. Arguments became betrayals. Betrayals became enemies. Eventually, Salvatore disappeared. The family accepted his death because no body was ever found. Antonio never did. He spent years believing his brother remained alive. Years preparing for the possibility that one day Salvatore would return. By the time Emma finished reading the remaining letters, one fact became impossible to ignore. Her parents had been involved in that conflict. Not accidentally. Directly. Giovanni Rossi knew things. Important things. Dangerous things. Things important enough that Antonio trusted him more than some members of his own family. The realization became even more disturbing later that evening when Luca reviewed the letters himself. The study remained silent while he read. Dante stood nearby pretending to focus on security reports. Vittorio sat across the room reviewing legal documents. Yet everyone paid attention to the same thing. The letters. By the time Luca reached the final page, his expression had become unreadable. He believed Salvatore survived. It wasn't a question. Emma nodded. My father sounded certain. Dante finally spoke. Then either Giovanni saw proof. He hesitated. Or someone wanted him to believe Salvatore was alive. Luca looked toward him. Why? Dante's answer came immediately. Because fear makes people easier to control. Nobody liked that possibility. Unfortunately, nobody could dismiss it either. The investigation accelerated after that. Every surviving record connected to Salvatore Moretti was pulled from storage. Financial archives were examined. Property records were reviewed. Old associates were identified. The deeper they looked, the stranger the story became. Entire years of Salvatore's life seemed missing. Documents vanished. Records ended abruptly. Transactions appeared after his reported death. It was as though someone had spent decades erasing pieces of his existence while accidentally leaving others behind. Then another discovery emerged. Several accounts connected to shell companies continued receiving money years after Salvatore supposedly died. Not large amounts. Just enough to support someone living quietly in the shadows. The implications were obvious. Dead men didn't spend money. While Luca focused on the investigation, Bianca focused on Emma. The hostility she once disguised behind politeness became increasingly difficult to hide. Small insults turned into deliberate attacks. She questioned Emma's presence during meetings. She mocked her lack of education. She openly suggested the will had been manipulated. Yet none of it achieved the result Bianca wanted, because every attempt only pushed Luca closer to Emma. He never tolerated the insults, never ignored them, never allowed them to continue for long. The realization drove Bianca crazy. She had spent years trying to gain Luca's attention. Emma somehow received it without trying. What nobody knew was that Bianca had already crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Late one night, while the estate slept, she met someone near the old boathouse overlooking the cliffs. The meeting lasted only minutes. No guards saw it, no cameras captured it. Yet one sentence spoken there would have terrified everyone if they had heard it. The girl remembers more than expected. The reply came immediately. Cold, calm, dangerous. Then she becomes a liability. Back inside the estate, Emma sat alone reading her father's letters again. Something bothered her. The feeling refused to disappear. Giovanni wasn't simply telling a story. He was trying to leave instructions. The realization arrived gradually. Certain phrases repeated too often. Certain words felt strangely emphasized. Her pulse quickened. She grabbed a notebook and started writing them down. The process took nearly an hour. When she finally finished, she stared at the hidden message formed by the selected words. Look beneath the cellar. Emma froze. The cellar. La Stella. Suddenly everything made sense. Antonio's warnings. Salvatore's obsession. The violence. The inheritance. The secret was never hidden inside the will. The will only pointed toward it. Whatever everyone wanted had been hidden inside the restaurant itself. Her heart pounded as she rushed toward Luca's study. It was nearly midnight, yet she knew he would still be awake. Luca Moretti rarely slept during a crisis. She pushed open the door without knocking, ready to tell him everything. The words were already forming. I found it. Then she stopped. Luca wasn't alone. Dante stood beside him. Vittorio stood near the desk. Maria sat nearby. And resting in the center of the table was the final sealed section of Antonio Moretti's will. Nobody spoke. The atmosphere felt electric, important, dangerous. Luca looked from Emma to the document and back again. Good. His voice remained calm. Because we're about to open the last secret my father left behind. Emma's pulse accelerated. The final section. The final answers. The final truth. Somewhere beneath La Stella waited a secret powerful enough to survive decades. Powerful enough to inspire murder. Powerful enough to connect the Rossi family and the Moretti family across an entire generation. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Emma had the terrible feeling that the truth might be far more dangerous than the mystery. Chapter 8. Public Protection. The final section of Antonio Moretti's will changed everything, and for several minutes after Vittorio finished reading, nobody inside Luca's study spoke. It was not the kind of silence that came from confusion. It was the kind of silence that came when every person in the room understood that the truth had finally become more dangerous than the mystery. Salvatore Moretti had never wanted money. He had never wanted a restaurant. He had never wanted a legal inheritance. What he wanted was the evidence hidden beneath La Stella, evidence Antonio Moretti had collected decades earlier, evidence Giovanni and Elena Rossi had helped protect, evidence powerful enough to expose forged documents, hidden accounts, signed confessions, stolen assets, and the names of men who had pretended to be loyal while secretly preparing to destroy the Moretti family from within. Emma stood near the doorway with her father's hidden message still burning inside her mind. Look beneath the cellar. She had thought the phrase was a clue. Now she understood it was a warning. Her parents had not simply helped Antonio survive. They had helped him hide the one thing Salvatore could never afford to let the world see. Luca said nothing for a long time. His face remained calm, unreadable, controlled, but Emma had begun to understand his silence. The colder he became, the more violently his mind was working beneath the surface. Maria sat beside the fireplace with one hand pressed against her heart, not from illness this time, but from memory. Dante stood near the door, jaw tight, eyes moving between every person in the room as if he no longer trusted the walls themselves. Vittorio carefully folded the final section of the will, but his hands were not steady. Then the door opened suddenly, and a security officer stepped inside with a tablet clutched in both hands. "Boss?" he said, and the fear in his voice made everyone look up. Luca's eyes lifted. "What happened?" The officer swallowed. Someone tried to access the archive servers again. The room seemed to tighten. "Again?" Luca asked. The officer nodded. This time they used credentials belonging to senior staff. Emma felt a chill move across her skin. Senior staff meant inside help. Senior staff meant access. Senior staff meant whoever was working for the enemy was not some distant stranger hiding outside the gates. They were close enough to touch the family from within. Dante moved first, crossing the room to examine the tablet. His expression darkened with every second. "They didn't get through," he said. But even that didn't sound like relief. Luca stood slowly. But they knew where to look. Nobody answered, because the answer was obvious. The final section had been opened less than an hour earlier. Somehow the enemy already knew La Stella mattered. Somehow information had traveled faster than security could contain it. Luca looked around the room once, and for the first time Emma saw his gaze pause on Bianca, who had been standing near the bookcase with an expression of carefully performed innocence. The pause lasted less than a second. It was enough. Bianca noticed. Emma noticed. Maria noticed. Bianca immediately looked offended, then frightened, then angry, and the speed of those emotions betrayed more than words ever could. Luca did not accuse her. Not yet. Instead, he made a decision. By evening, every senior member of the Moretti estate had been summoned into the main hall. Guards, advisors, household managers, family representatives, legal staff, security officers, and a few long-term associates filled the space beneath the enormous chandelier. Emma stood near the back, uncomfortable beneath the weight of so many eyes, wishing she could disappear into the marble walls. She still felt like the waitress everyone had mocked at Bellissimo Italiano. She still remembered the laughter, the insults, the way Sophia had looked at her as though she were beneath the floor she cleaned. Yet now those same kinds of people lowered their voices when she entered a room, not because they respected her, but because Luca Moretti had made it dangerous not to. When Luca entered the hall, conversation died instantly. The effect he had on people still unsettled Emma. He did not need to raise his voice. He did not need to demand attention. The room simply gave it to him. He walked to the center of the hall, stopped, and looked over every person gathered there. "Some of you have heard rumors," he said, his voice calm enough to frighten everyone more. "Some of you have questions. Tonight I will answer the only one that matters." Emma's pulse quickened because something inside her already knew he was about to say her name. Luca's gaze found her across the room, and every eye followed. Heat rose into her face. Bianca's mouth tightened. Dante's expression remained unreadable. Maria watched silently from the side, her eyes shining with something that looked almost like approval. Luca continued, "Emma Rossi is under my protection." The sentence struck the hall like thunder. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Emma forgot how to breathe. Luca's voice remained steady. "Any threat against her will be treated as a threat against me. Any attempt to intimidate her, use her, humiliate her, manipulate her, or harm her will be answered by the Moretti family." Silence spread through the hall, heavier than applause, heavier than shock. Everyone understood exactly what he had done. This was not casual protection. This was not temporary security. This was not because Emma was a witness. Luca had publicly drawn a line around her in front of his entire world. Crossing that line meant declaring war on him. Emma should have felt trapped by it. Instead, against every instinct she had spent years building, she felt protected. Truly protected. Bianca left before the gathering ended, her heels striking the marble too sharply to be accidental, and Luca noticed without turning his head. Later that night, Emma stood alone on the terrace overlooking the sea, trying to make sense of the strange ache in her chest. The Mediterranean stretched beneath the moonlight, beautiful and dark, while the estate behind her hummed with quiet danger. She heard Luca approach before he spoke. Somehow she knew his footsteps now. He stopped beside her and rested one hand on the stone railing. For a while, neither of them said anything. Then Emma whispered, "You didn't have to do that." Luca did not look away from the sea. "Yes, I did." She turned toward him. "Why?" The question seemed simple, but the silence that followed told her the answer was not. Luca's jaw tightened slightly. "Because the people targeting you are desperate. That's not the whole answer." He looked at her then, and the intensity in his eyes made her heart stumble. For a moment the Mafia Boss disappeared, and the man beneath him looked out. "Because I don't intend to lose anyone else." The words were quiet, almost harsh, as though he hated letting them escape. Emma understood suddenly that Luca's protection was not only about strategy, it was also about fear. Not fear for himself, fear of failing someone he cared about. Before she could respond, his phone rang. The moment he answered, the softness vanished. The conversation lasted less than a minute, but by the time he lowered the phone, the danger had returned to his face. "Dante's team reached La Stella," he said. Emma's heartbeat quickened. "The cellar?" Luca nodded. "They found it." "And?" He was silent too long. Far too long. "They found evidence," he said finally. "Financial records. Signed confessions. Witness statements. Enough to prove Antonio was right." Emma swallowed. "Then it's over?" Luca's expression hardened. "No. One word. Cold and final. The newest document is only 6 months old." The meaning hit her slowly, then all at once. 6 months meant the conspiracy had never ended. 6 months meant someone was still protecting Salvatore's secrets. 6 months meant the past was alive. Then Luca's phone rang again. This time he answered and said nothing at all. He only listened. Emma watched his face darken until the air around them felt colder than the sea wind. When the call ended, he turned toward her. "They found footprints in the cellar." Emma's stomach tightened. "Fresh?" Luca nodded. "Very." A pause followed. "The man who left them walks with a limp." The world seemed to stop. Emma remembered her father's letter. She remembered the line describing Salvatore after the accident, the injury that left him limping for the rest of his life. Neither of them needed to say the conclusion out loud. If the footprint belonged to Salvatore Moretti, then the dead man was not dead. And if Salvatore Moretti was alive, then the most dangerous enemy in Luca's family had just stepped out of the shadows. Chapter 9. The Counterattack. Before sunrise, Luca personally escorted Emma to La Stella, and the entire drive passed in a silence so heavy it felt like another person sitting between them. After the discovery of the fresh footprints inside the hidden cellar, there was no longer room for denial. Someone had reached Antonio Moretti's secret before them. Someone had walked beneath the old restaurant with a limp that matched the injury described in Giovanni Rossi's letter. Someone who should have been dead for more than 20 years. La Stella stood at the edge of a forgotten coastal road outside Naples, its faded exterior and weathered sign making it look like nothing more than an abandoned family restaurant swallowed by time. But Emma knew better now. Ordinary places often carried the most dangerous secrets. She stepped out of the vehicle and looked at the cracked stone entrance, feeling a strange pull in her chest, as though the building itself recognized her before she recognized it. Luca stood beside her, close enough that his shoulder nearly brushed hers, and for once neither of them pretended the closeness was accidental. Dante and 4 trusted guards secured the perimeter while Luca led Emma inside. The restaurant smelled of dust, old wood, and memories left untouched for too long. Tables were covered with white sheets. The bar mirror was cracked. The kitchen tiles were worn from decades of footsteps. Emma imagined her parents here, younger, afraid, brave enough to stand beside Antonio Moretti when even blood relatives had turned away. The thought made her throat tighten. Luca noticed. He always noticed. "You don't have to go down there," he said quietly. Emma looked toward the kitchen, where the hidden cellar waited beneath the floor. "Yes, I do." Something shifted in his eyes. Approval, perhaps. Or concern. Maybe both. Dante opened the concealed hatch, and cold air rose from below like breath from a grave. They descended the narrow stairs one by one, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The cellar beneath La Stella was larger than Emma expected, with stone walls, rusted shelves, sealed boxes, old wine racks, and a steel cabinet built into the far wall. Dust covered most surfaces, but not all. Several boxes had been moved. Papers had been disturbed. Footprints crossed the floor. Fresh footprints. Dante crouched beside one impression and looked up at Luca without speaking. He didn't need to. The man with the limp had been there recently. Emma's attention moved to the steel cabinet. Something about it felt wrong. The lock was scratched, but not broken. Whoever had come before them had tried to open it and failed. Luca understood instantly. "Open it." Dante forced the cabinet within seconds, and when the metal door swung wide, decades of secrets stared back at them. Inside were folders, photographs, signed statements, property records, bank transfers, and sealed envelopes organized with terrifying precision. Antonio Moretti had not merely hidden evidence. He had built a weapon. The deeper Luca searched, the colder his expression became. Salvatore had forged documents, bribed officials, stolen company shares, created shadow accounts, and placed loyal men inside the Moretti organization long before anyone suspected him. But the most disturbing part was not the history. It was the dates. Several records were recent, less than a year old. One was 6 months old. The conspiracy had not died with Salvatore's supposed disappearance. It had continued breathing beneath the surface, waiting, growing, surviving. Then Emma found the photograph. Her fingers froze the moment she saw it. Antonio Moretti stood beside Maria, Giovanni Rossi, Elena Rossi, and Salvatore Moretti, whose face remained fully visible this time. The resemblance to Luca was impossible to ignore. The same dark intensity, the same commanding presence. But Salvatore's expression held something Luca's never did. Emptiness. A cold hunger that made Emma's skin prickle. On the back of the photograph, written in Antonio's handwriting, were the words, "Trust Giovanni. He knows what must survive." Emma read the sentence twice, and suddenly the truth struck her with painful clarity. Her parents had not been witnesses. They had been guardians. Antonio had not placed her name in the will out of guilt or charity. He had placed her there because the Rossi family carried the final piece of something he could not trust to his own blood. Before she could speak, Dante discovered a hidden compartment behind the cabinet's rear panel. Inside was a black folder newer than everything else. Luca opened it, and the cellar seemed to grow colder with every page he turned. Financial transfers, encrypted messages, surveillance photos, secret meetings. Emma's stomach tightened when she recognized the woman in the images, Bianca Santoro. There she was outside private clubs, near the old boathouse, beside unknown men, accepting envelopes, sending messages, meeting someone whose face was always hidden. The dates went back months. Long before Maria was poisoned, long before Emma served Luca's table, long before the will surfaced. Bianca had not become involved because of jealousy. She had been involved from the beginning. Luca said nothing, and that silence frightened Emma more than rage would have. Rage burned fast. Luca's silence meant decisions were being made. Dante continued searching the folder until he found a handwritten note signed by Salvatore Moretti. The message was short, but it made Emma's blood turn cold. "Prepare the girl. She is more important than she realizes." Emma stared at the words until they blurred. The girl. Her. Salvatore had known about her before she ever knew about him. Before she saved Maria. Before she entered the Moretti estate. Before any of this began. That meant Emma was not an accident in the story. She had been expected, planned around, maybe even hunted long before she understood she was part of the game. Luca took the note from her hand, his jaw hard. Find Bianca. Dante made the call immediately. Minutes passed. Then the answer came. Bianca was gone. Her room had been cleared, her phone disabled, her bank activity wiped, her car found abandoned outside Naples. Someone had warned her. Someone still inside Luca's world was feeding information to Salvatore. Emma watched Luca absorb the news without reacting, and for the first time she understood why people feared him. He did not need to explode to become dangerous. He became dangerous when he became still. Then Emma noticed a second note tucked inside the folder. Smaller than the first, folded once, with her name written across the front. Emma Rossi. Every instinct in Luca seemed to reject the idea of her touching it, but Emma reached for it anyway. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the paper. The handwriting matched Salvatore's. If you are reading this, Antonio failed. Come find me before Luca does. The words felt less like a threat than an invitation, and that made them worse. Luca read the note once, and immediately crushed it in his hand. No. Emma looked at him. You don't even know what I was going to say. His eyes locked onto hers, dark, protective, furious beneath the control. You are not meeting him. The possessiveness in his voice should have angered her. Instead, it made something inside her ache, because she understood now that Luca was not protecting an asset or a witness. He was protecting her. Before either of them could continue, Dante's phone rang again. The call lasted less than 30 seconds, but by the time it ended, the color had drained from his face. Luca turned slowly. What happened? Dante swallowed, and for the first time since Emma had met him, real fear touched his voice. We found Bianca. Relief almost appeared, but Dante destroyed it with the next words. She's dead. The seller went silent. Enzo had died. Bianca had died. Every person connected to Salvatore vanished the moment they became useful. The enemy was cleaning the board piece by piece. But Emma remained alive. That was what frightened Luca. That was what frightened Emma too. Salvatore had killed witnesses, removed allies, erased photographs, poisoned Maria, and exposed Bianca. Yet he had never tried to kill Emma. Not once. The truth arrived with terrible clarity. Emma Rossi was not the target. She was the objective. Dante handed Luca one final photograph recovered near Bianca's body. It showed Bianca standing beside an older man in a dark coat and hat, his face partly shadowed but not hidden enough. Emma recognized him before anyone spoke. The same man from her father's photograph. The same man from Antonio's records. The same man everyone had buried 2 decades ago. Salvatore Moretti. Alive. Watching. Waiting. And somehow, he had known Emma long before she ever learned his name. Chapter 10. The Fall of the Traitors. Bianca Santoro's death changed the investigation overnight. By the time Luca, Emma, and Dante returned to the Moretti estate, the atmosphere had become darker than ever before. Nobody spoke during the drive back. The photograph recovered beside Bianca's body rested on Luca's lap, and every time Emma looked at it, she felt the same chill run through her chest. Salvatore Moretti was real. Not a ghost. Not a rumor. Not a dead man hidden inside old stories. He was alive. Worse, he had been close enough to Bianca to use her, manipulate her, and eliminate her the moment she became a liability. The realization followed Emma into the estate like a shadow. Yet the most disturbing thought wasn't Bianca's betrayal. It was the message Salvatore left behind. Prepare the girl. She is more important than she realizes. The sentence refused to leave her mind. It felt like a puzzle with one missing piece. A piece everyone else seemed to know except her. As soon as they arrived, Maria demanded a private meeting. The older woman looked exhausted, but there was a determination in her eyes Emma had never seen before. For years, Maria had protected Antonio's secrets. Now she looked ready to destroy them. The meeting took place inside Antonio's old office, a room untouched since his death. Dust-covered books lined the walls. Family photographs stood frozen in time. The air itself seemed heavy with memory. Maria waited until the door closed before speaking. There is one thing Antonio never wrote down. Luca immediately looked at her. Why not? Maria's expression darkened. Because he was afraid. The answer shocked everyone. Antonio Moretti was many things, but fear was not a word usually associated with him. Maria folded her hands slowly. The evidence beneath La Stella wasn't the most important thing Salvatore wanted. Emma felt her pulse quicken. Then what was? Maria's eyes moved toward her. The silence that followed lasted too long. Then the answer came. You. The room seemed to stop. Emma stared. Luca's expression hardened instantly. Dante looked genuinely confused. Maria continued before anyone could interrupt. 26 years earlier, when Antonio discovered Salvatore's betrayal, he uncovered something else hidden among the forged records and stolen accounts. A second secret, one so dangerous that even Antonio struggled to believe it. Salvatore had become obsessed with an ancient inheritance tied to several powerful Sicilian families. Not money, not land, influence, legitimacy, control. According to records Antonio found, one bloodline carried legal claim to assets and holdings worth hundreds of millions hidden through generations. Most people considered the records myths. Salvatore did not. He spent years searching for proof. Then he found it. Emma listened in silence as Maria revealed the truth her parents had protected for decades. Elena Rossi's family was connected to that bloodline. Emma wasn't merely the daughter of Antonio's trusted friends. She was the final living heir connected to an inheritance Salvatore had spent half his life chasing. The room remained silent after the revelation. Emma could barely breathe. Every part of her wanted to reject the story. It sounded impossible, ridiculous. Yet suddenly every piece began fitting together. The will, the protection, the photographs, the warnings. Salvatore's obsession. Prepare the girl. She is more important than she realizes. The message finally made sense. Salvatore never wanted Emma dead because Emma represented something far more valuable alive. Luca stood abruptly and crossed the room toward the window. The movement alone revealed how furious he had become. So all of this, his voice sounded colder than Emma had ever heard. All of this happened because Salvatore believes he can use Emma. Maria nodded. Yes. Dante swore under his breath. Emma simply sat there trying to process the fact that her entire life might have been shaped by secrets she never knew existed. Unfortunately, they had little time to absorb the revelation. One of Luca's security officers burst into the office carrying a tablet. The man's face was pale. Boss, you need to see this. Luca took the device immediately. Whatever appeared on the screen caused his expression to darken even further. He handed it to Dante. Then Dante handed it to Emma. The video had been uploaded only minutes earlier. Security footage. Grainy. Dark. Yet clear enough. It showed Bianca entering an abandoned warehouse several hours before her death. More importantly, it showed who she met. Salvatore Moretti. For the first time, his face appeared clearly on camera. Older than the photographs. Sharper. Harder. But unmistakably the same man. The room watched in silence as Bianca argued with him. No audio existed, only images. Yet the fear visible on Bianca's face told its own story. Then the video ended abruptly. Seconds later, Bianca disappeared forever. Emma felt cold. Salvatore hadn't merely silenced her. He had executed her. Luca stared at the frozen image for several long seconds before speaking. No more waiting. Everyone looked at him. The decision had already been made. Months of investigation, years of secrets, decades of fear. Finished. Luca turned toward Dante. Find every property connected to Salvatore. Dante nodded. Already working on it. Luca continued. Freeze every account mentioned in Antonio's files. Another nod. Done. Then his gaze moved toward Emma. The intensity there stole her breath. And from this moment forward, you don't leave my sight. The possessiveness in the statement should have annoyed her. Instead, it made her feel strangely safe. Before she could respond, another notification appeared on the tablet. An incoming message. Unknown sender. Dante immediately moved to block it, but Luca stopped him. Open it. The message contained only a single photograph. Emma. Taken recently. Very recently. She stood on the terrace overlooking the sea at the Moretti estate. The angle made one thing painfully obvious. The photograph had been taken from inside the estate grounds. Someone had been watching her, watching them, watching everything. Beneath the image appeared a single sentence. "Tell Emma the truth before I do." Nobody spoke, because everyone understood the threat. Salvatore wasn't hiding anymore. He was pushing, pressuring, forcing their hand. Then a second message arrived. This one contained an address, nothing else, no explanation, no demand, just an address. Dante checked it immediately. His expression changed. "Boss." Luca looked up. "What?" Dante swallowed. "It's one of Salvatore's old properties." Silence filled the room. The war had finally become direct. No more clues. No more dead intermediaries. No more hidden messages. Salvatore was inviting them to come. The question was why. Luca stared at the address for several seconds before making his decision. "Prepare the team." Emma already knew what he was about to say. "We're going." For the first time since Bianca's death, something close to satisfaction appeared in Luca's eyes. Not happiness. Not relief. Determination. Because after 26 years, the Moretti family finally knew where their enemy wanted them to look. The only problem was that men like Salvatore Moretti never left invitations without a reason. And deep down, Emma suspected the address wasn't a trap designed to kill them. It was a trap designed to reveal something far worse. Chapter 11. Mine. The address Salvatore Moretti sent led them to an abandoned vineyard overlooking the Sicilian coast, a place forgotten by time and hidden behind hills that seemed determined to keep outsiders away. By the time Luca's convoy arrived, the sun had already disappeared beneath the horizon, leaving the estate wrapped in shadows and silence. The property looked dead. Empty windows stared across the dark landscape. Vines twisted around rusted fences. The old villa sat at the center of everything like a sleeping predator. Yet the moment Luca stepped from the vehicle, he knew exactly what Emma felt. They were expected. Nothing about this meeting was accidental. Salvatore wanted them there. He wanted Emma there. That realization followed them through the open front doors and into the enormous entrance hall, where dust-covered furniture rested beneath white sheets and portraits of long-dead aristocrats watched from the walls. The entire house felt like a stage waiting for a performance to begin. Then they saw him. Salvatore Moretti sat alone beneath a single lamp holding a glass of wine as though he were welcoming guests into his home instead of confronting the family that had spent decades hunting him. For several seconds nobody spoke. 26 years of secrets, betrayals, disappearances, murders, and lies suddenly had a face. Salvatore looked older than the photographs, but no less dangerous. The resemblance to Luca was impossible to ignore. The same dark eyes, the same commanding presence, the same ability to make an entire room focus on him without effort. Yet where Luca carried control, Salvatore carried calculation. Where Luca inspired loyalty, Salvatore inspired caution. Slowly he set the wine glass down and smiled. About time. The calmness in his voice felt unnatural. Luca's expression hardened instantly. "Stand up," Salvatore laughed softly. "No greeting? No questions?" The atmosphere tightened. Emma could feel the anger radiating from Luca, even though his face remained perfectly controlled. Salvatore noticed it too. His smile widened slightly. Then his attention shifted toward Emma. The change was immediate. Something behind his eyes softened. Not kindness, not affection, recognition. Emma. Hearing him say her name felt wrong, deeply wrong. Emma stared back at him. "You know who I am." Salvatore nodded once. "I've known who you are your entire life." The answer landed harder than she expected. Luca took a step forward. "Enough." One word. Sharp. Dangerous. Salvatore ignored him. "You deserve answers." Luca's jaw tightened. She deserves the truth. For the first time, Salvatore actually looked serious. The amusement vanished. The games disappeared. "Then let's talk about the truth." He stood slowly, the limp visible immediately as he crossed the room. The same limp from Giovanni Rossi's letters. The same limp connected to the footprints beneath La Stella, proof standing directly in front of them. Salvatore stopped only a few feet from Emma and looked at her as though studying something he had spent years searching for. "Do you know why Antonio protected your family?" Emma answered carefully. "Because my parents helped him." Salvatore smiled. "That's what they told you." Emma felt her pulse quicken. "It's the truth. Part of it." The answer came immediately. Then Salvatore looked toward Luca. "Your father never understood the whole story." Luca moved again. "Choose your next words carefully." Salvatore laughed softly, still protecting her. His eyes returned to Emma. "Good." The statement confused everyone. Then Salvatore delivered the first blow. The inheritance was never money. Silence filled the room. The inheritance was never land. Another pause. And it certainly wasn't La Stella. Emma felt her stomach tighten. Every piece of information she had received suddenly felt unstable. Salvatore continued. "The inheritance was you." The room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Emma simply stared at him. "What does that mean?" Salvatore's gaze never left hers. "It means your mother spent years hiding you." Emma shook her head. "From who?" His answer came instantly. "From me." Luca's expression darkened. Dante's hand moved closer to his weapon, yet Salvatore remained calm. "I spent 20 years searching for the final heir connected to one of the oldest family claims in Sicily. I expected power, ambition, greed. Instead, I found a waitress who gave away tips to people poorer than herself. For the first time, something genuine appeared in his expression. Disappointment mixed with admiration. "You weren't what I expected." Emma felt her heartbeat accelerating. Nothing he said made sense. Yet somehow she could feel the truth hiding underneath it. Salvatore slowly reached inside his jacket. Every weapon in the room immediately shifted toward him. Luca stepped between him and Emma without thinking. The movement happened so naturally that Emma barely noticed it until she realized she could no longer see Salvatore clearly. Salvatore stopped and smiled. "There it is." Luca's voice became ice. "Try me." For several seconds, the two men stared at one another. Then Salvatore slowly removed a single photograph and placed it on the table beside him. "Look." Nobody moved at first. Eventually, Emma stepped forward. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the photograph. The image stole her breath. It showed her mother, younger, smiling, standing beside Antonio Moretti and Salvatore. The date printed in the corner placed the photograph nearly a year before Emma was born. On the back, written in Elena Rossi's handwriting, were 6 words. "If anything happens, protect her." Emma felt the world tilt slightly. Her mother's handwriting, her mother's words. The room disappeared around her. Then Salvatore spoke again. "Your mother knew." Emma looked up. "Knew what?" The answer arrived quietly, almost gently, that people would eventually come looking for you. The silence afterward felt endless, because suddenly every sacrifice her parents made seemed different. Every warning, every secret, every decision. Luca watched Emma carefully, seeing the confusion in her eyes, the fear, the heartbreak. Then something inside him finally snapped. 26 years of manipulation, months of attacks, the poisoning, the murders, the threats. Enough. Luca stepped forward until he stood directly between Emma and Salvatore. "You're done." The words echoed through the hall. Salvatore's smile faded slightly. "Am I?" Luca's gaze became deadly. "You poisoned my mother. You murdered people to hide your tracks. You spent decades destroying everything my father built." A pause followed. "You're done." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Salvatore's face. Only briefly. Then Dante's phone rang. He answered immediately. The conversation lasted less than 15 seconds. By the end, his expression had changed completely. "Boss." Luca didn't look away from Salvatore. "What?" Dante swallowed. "The authorities just raided 3 properties connected to Salvatore's network." Silence. Then Dante continued. Every account has been frozen. Every shell company exposed. Every partner identified. Salvatore's smile vanished completely. For the first time all night, the balance shifted. Luca noticed it immediately. So did Emma. Years of preparation, years of secrets, years of control, cracking. Salvatore slowly looked around the room. Then his gaze settled on Emma one final time. You still don't know everything. Emma's heart tightened. Then tell me. Salvatore opened his mouth, then stopped. Because outside, the sound of approaching sirens echoed across the vineyard. The authorities had arrived. The war was ending, and whatever final truth Salvatore intended to reveal was about to disappear with him. Chapter 12. Forever Mine. The sound of approaching sirens rolled across the vineyard like thunder, echoing through the old villa as the final chapter of a war spanning more than 26 years reached its end. For a brief moment, nobody moved. Salvatore Moretti stood frozen beneath the lamp while Luca watched him with the cold certainty of a man who finally knew his enemy had nowhere left to run. The authorities had his accounts, his properties, his partners, his financial network, and now they had his location. Every secret he spent decades protecting was collapsing around him. Yet, what surprised Emma most was that Salvatore didn't look afraid. He looked tired, deeply, painfully tired. The arrogance that had carried him through years of manipulation seemed to disappear all at once, leaving behind an aging man staring at the ruins of his own obsession. His eyes found Emma one last time. Your mother was right, he said quietly. The statement caught everyone off guard. Emma frowned. About what? A faint smile touched his face. Sad. Defeated. Human. She said if I ever found you, I would eventually realize I had been chasing the wrong thing. Silence settled over the room. Salvatore slowly lowered his gaze. I spent half my life searching for power. He laughed once, though there was no humor in it. Your parents spent theirs protecting people they loved. Another pause followed. Guess which one of us died alone? The words lingered in the air long after he finished speaking. Then the front doors burst open. Law enforcement officers flooded the villa. Commands were shouted. Weapons were drawn. Within moments, Salvatore Moretti's long escape came to an end. He offered no resistance, no dramatic final battle, no desperate attempt to flee. As officers placed him in handcuffs, he looked toward Luca. Your father would have hated what I became. Luca's expression never changed. He already did. For the first time all evening, Salvatore laughed genuinely. Then he disappeared into the night. Just like that. The ghost who haunted the Moretti family for more than 2 decades was gone. The silence that followed felt almost unreal. Emma stood motionless, trying to process everything that had happened. The lies, the inheritance, the danger, the truth about her parents. The realization that her entire life had been shaped by a secret she never knew existed. Then she felt Luca's hand close around hers. Warm, steady, real. She looked up. He didn't say anything at first. He simply held her hand, as though letting her confirm for herself that the nightmare was finally over. The gesture meant more than any speech ever could. Weeks passed. Investigations expanded across Sicily. Salvatore's network collapsed faster than anyone expected. The evidence hidden beneath La Stella proved devastating. Corrupt officials were arrested, hidden accounts seized, criminal partnerships exposed. Several people who spent years believing themselves untouchable suddenly found themselves answering difficult questions. For the first time in decades, the Moretti family no longer lived beneath the shadow of Salvatore's secrets. Maria recovered fully. Dante returned to acting like the world's most intimidating bodyguard. Vittorio finally smiled occasionally. Even the estate itself seemed different. Lighter, quieter, safer. Yet the greatest change happened inside Emma. Little by little, she stopped seeing herself as the frightened waitress everyone once ignored. She stopped apologizing for existing. She stopped shrinking whenever attention turned toward her. The confidence didn't arrive overnight. It arrived one small step at a time. Every conversation, every decision, every moment she chose to trust herself. Luca noticed the transformation before anyone else. He noticed everything. One evening, several months later, The Moretti estate hosted a formal celebration overlooking the Mediterranean. Business leaders, family allies, political figures, and longtime friends filled the property. Music drifted through the warm evening air. Laughter echoed across the gardens. For the first time since Emma entered Luca's world, nobody seemed worried about hidden enemies. Nobody expected an attack. Nobody feared tomorrow. Emma stood on the terrace watching the sunset paint the sea gold when Luca appeared beside her. The sight still affected her. It probably always would. Dark suit. Calm expression. Absolute confidence. The most powerful man she had ever known. Yet somehow he looked at her as though she was the remarkable one. "You've been hiding all evening." Emma smiled. "I've been avoiding your business partners." "Smart." She laughed softly. The sound drew a faint smile from him. For several moments they simply stood together watching the ocean. Then Luca turned toward her. Something in his expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. Emma felt her heartbeat stumble. "What?" she asked quietly. Luca reached into his pocket. The world seemed to stop. Around them the party continued. Music played, glasses clinked, people talked and laughed, yet none of it reached Emma anymore. Her entire focus narrowed to the man standing in front of her. Slowly, Luca removed a small velvet box. Emma forgot how to breathe. "Luca," he opened the box. A ring rested inside. Elegant. Beautiful. Perfect. Then he said the words she would remember for the rest of her life. "For most of my life, I believed loyalty mattered more than love." His voice remained steady, but Emma could hear the truth behind every word. "Then I met a waitress who kept risking her life for other people." Her eyes immediately filled with tears. Luca continued, "You never wanted power. You never wanted money. You never wanted any part of this world." A faint smile appeared. "That's exactly why you deserve it." Emma laughed through her tears. "That sounds backwards." "Probably." Another step closer. "But so are you." She shook her head. "That's not romantic. I own several companies." His expression remained perfectly serious. "Not poetry." Emma laughed again. The sound broke whatever tension remained between them. Then Luca became serious. Truly serious. His eyes never left hers. "Emma Rossi." The world seemed to disappear. "Will you marry me?" For one beautiful second, she couldn't answer. She thought about the restaurant, the insults, the betrayal, the fear, the secrets, the danger, the impossible journey that brought her here. Then she thought about Luca standing beside her through every part of it, protecting her, believing in her, choosing her, not because of inheritance, not because of power, not because of destiny, because of who she was. The answer became the easiest decision of her life. Yes. The word barely left her lips before Luca pulled her into his arms. Cheers erupted across the terrace. Someone started clapping. Maria was crying openly. Dante looked deeply uncomfortable by all the emotions, which somehow made the moment even better. Luca slid the ring onto her finger and lowered his forehead against hers. For a brief moment, the rest of the world disappeared. No enemies. No secrets. No conspiracies. No fear. Just them. Then Luca whispered something only Emma could hear. 3 simple words. Possessive. Protective. Completely sincere. "You're mine now." Emma smiled through happy tears and wrapped her arms around him. "Good," she whispered back, "because you're mine too." Above them, the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, carrying the last shadows of the past with it. The secrets were gone. The war was over. The enemies had fallen. And for the first time in a very long time, the future belonged entirely to them. If you enjoyed Emma and Luca's story, let us know in the comments. What was your favorite moment? The rescue, the investigation, or the proposal? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more Mafia Romance stories every week. And remember, sometimes one act of kindness can change an empire.